Living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Coping with the death of a life partner can be one of the most heart-wrenching journeys we face in life. And all too often, while struggling through waves of sadness, the reality of finances and legal tasks can make the grieving process even more difficult. Today, we'll talk about how to cope with the death of your loved one, and we'll learn about some legal and financial tips you should be aware of. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm Janet Whitmoyer, your host. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are first going to discuss how to cope with the death of a loved one. Joining us today is Paul Goodman of Frontier Home Health and Hospice. Thanks for coming to the show, Paul.
Glad to be here.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about are what are some of the normal feelings that people would have after losing a spouse or a partner?
Some intense shock is going to be involved. Fear of being alone, anger often comes in with that too. So a lot of feelings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you talk about like the anger and the fear, I understand there are the stages of the grieving process. Can you explain a little bit about what that is for all of us?
Yeah, there's been 5 stages that have been identified that I truly believe people do pass through. Maybe not all in the same way by any means, but may pass through them several times. First one being denial. And that is a very strong defense mechanism that we almost subconsciously deal with the loss of a loved one. It's that first shock and just that almost denying of reality that it happened. Maybe even it is the first understanding of a terminal illness. And so a very strong stage.
Okay.
And then secondly, anger can follow that as the reality of the death or the terminal illness diagnosis we can displace, and it's another defense mechanism our body uses, but it can be displaced almost anywhere, to a friend, to a family member, to actually the person that has passed. Why are you leaving me alone? But another stage that is very common. And then the third stage, as that reality sets in even more so, we can go to a stage of even bargaining. Bargaining with ourselves. We can ask a lot of the if only questions. If only we got to the doctor quicker. If only the doctor diagnosed it quicker. And also it can be almost that secret pact with a higher power. If I do this, can I spend a little more time with my loved one? And so that can be very real. And then there's a stage which most go through, which is depression, and it can be very intense, or it can be lighter. But typically, it is the pulling away and trying to organize what has happened, and a person has to be careful with how intense that can be for each person. But it's very significant, and it can be prolonged, or it can be shorter. Some don't go through it, but most will.
Okay.
And then finally, there is the acceptance phase. And if a person's lucky enough to get to the acceptance phase, it's kind of a gift. It isn't. Many will not get past anger, bargaining, but if they do get to the acceptance phase, I'd like to call it even more of a reorganization of someone's life. To move forward, to step forward again.
Oh,
so those are the phases.
Great way to explain that. And is it true that people could bounce back and forth between the stages, and it may not go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but
Absolutely.
could go back and forth?
Absolutely. It's not always linear.
Okay.
And there's no right or wrong.
Okay.
It's just each individual and how hard they're grieving, absolutely, and how much support they may have.
Oh, and that's a very, very good point. So when you said people are different, how about men and women? Do women mourn differently than men do?
I truly believe they do. In generalities, women often are a little more emotionally based. they're more able usually to reach out to friends, to reach out to loved ones, and to be able to grieve openly, crying with someone on their shoulder, whereas a man will more than often, and I do believe this is starting to change a little bit, but I do believe they're in more protection mode of the family and themselves. Mm-hmm. They're going to grieve probably a little bit more privately, internalize things a little bit more, because they've learned to do so. And so yes, I believe there is a big difference.
So knowing that, what advice would you have for people? What can they do to help get themselves through the grieving process?
Right. I think reaching out to friends is big, but taking the time to just go ahead and not rush things. Mm-hmm. Take the time to heal first, and that can be with friends, that can be with your supports, but also good self-care is huge during that time. It's everything from appetite to continue to exercise and doing things that may not feel normal during that stage, but you push yourself to do so.
Okay. So once you've gotten to the point where you can take care of yourself, probably one of the next things is starting to go through your loved ones' personal belongings and that kind of thing,
Right.
And that's difficult again. What advice could you give people when they're going through that process?
You bet. I think not to rush that. Dispersing an estate can feel like you have to get after it very fast, but being very careful, reaching out to relatives, reaching out to loved ones that may have one piece that is important to them, or a grandkid that could take one memento and it'll mean everything for closure for that grandkid. Don't rush it, I guess would be my advice.
Okay. And I have one more quick question for you. I know you brought up the depression piece. What do you think people should do, or how can they seek help if they feel like they are being depressed?
Yes, I think watching how depression, it can sneak up on us, mm-hmm. and especially with grief. And if it feels prolonged, if it is interrupting multifacets of your day, of your work environment, your home environment, and for continued long periods of time, there's no shame in reaching out to a primary doctor that you may have and looking for a referral for counseling, and not being afraid to reach out even to a hospice agency, to social worker, and they can give good local references for counseling. Absolutely.
Okay. This has been really great information, Paul, and I want to thank you for coming in and sharing with us.
It's good to be here.
Unfortunately, grief is just one part of dealing with such a tough situation. Stay tuned to learn some tips on legal issues that may come up when you lose a loved one and how to handle them. We'll be right back.